Hi everybody, this is Damien from Legend Life. With our bucket list talks, we look to share with you tips, advice, and inspiration by speaking to travel experts, travel founders, and travelers who will help us create and inspire you to live your bucket list. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Graham Dixon. Graham is the founder of Arctic Kingdom, a company that provides land-based adventures in the Canadian Arctic. Graham has over 20 years of experience and has personally led over 50 major expeditions into the Canadian Arctic. So how are you going today, Graham?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the
Awesome.
invite to chat.
Very good. So, well, to get started, maybe you can give us a little bit of a background about yourself before you actually did your first trip to the Arctic. What was it you were doing and what led you to do the original trip to the Arctic?
I think the love for the Arctic started probably growing up, being surrounded by Inuit art, all of the legendary creatures, the polar bears and narwhals, and the beauty of soapstone carvings. And that was combined with scuba diving, which is normally not the first thing people think about when asked about the Arctic, but I have taught different types of diving and advanced diving, and was very active through university, running a scuba diving club that did everything from cave diving to ice diving to the tropics and fun. And it was a couple of years after graduating from the University of Pennsylvania that we did a alumni trip, and this really was the first expedition, if you will, to the Arctic, and it was to dive with walrus and bowhead whales. And we provided, I organized for all of the scuba diving support, so the tanks and weights and compressors and all of that. It was with a group of people that knew each other. And we started right from the beginning, working with local Inuit communities, with hunters, with guides. And so I think that's important right from the start, that it was always a sort of partnership in terms of collaboration. And the first trip was very successful. We had amazing encounters. We had, looking into the eyes of polar bears, of passing bowhead whales, of breaching, tail slapping, finning. I think one lifted a little inflatable up on its back. We saw a polar bear eating a walrus. It was a great adventure. We moved around ice packs in small boats. We had a special cage that we built out of plumbing supplies as a walrus dive cage, a little bit of a ode to the great white diving.
Yeah.
And it went off without a hitch. It was good weather. It was great. It was maybe too easy, too special. It was the Arctic setting the hook and pulling it in. And the next year there was two trips. One was returning to the same area. Another was further north at the top of Baffin for narwhals. And by the third and fourth years, we started to host and organize film crews. We ran a trip for a group called Ushuaia Nature, which is out of France. And they won all sorts of awards for a documentary that they produced up at the top of Baffin. And I'd say roughly the first 10 years was exploratory and film, and the last 10 years has been building on that foundation of finding the world's best spots for wildlife and making them accessible for visitors. And we've seen the profile of people changing from when, at first it was fairly hardcore and adventurous, and increasingly you're getting many older people that come to see it, many who have been all over the world, even to different parts of the Antarctic or other areas of the Arctic. And we've even had the pleasure of small kids, and I can only think how that actually changes someone's life who's 6 years old and starts to realize that they can visit the Arctic as easily as they can visit the Florida Keys or visit Sardinia, and see these animals and appreciate it. It's an accessible and important part of the planet.
Yep, no, definitely. So tell us in your words why, what you love so much about the region.
I think it is the best of geography, gobsmackingly beautiful sceneries. I jokingly refer to much of it as the Arctic Riviera, but underneath it, there's sincerity to it. You have snow-capped mountains, you have open ocean, you have amazing sunsets and sunrises, or northern lights, or midnight sun. And you combine that with amazing wildlife. When you find the right spots, it is bubbling. When wildlife interacts in a truly alive environment, that's biologically active. There's many different types of species and animals that interact with each other in different ways, some predatory, some collaborative or symbiotic, or and so to see bubbling wildlife in a huge expanse, one that really connects you with Mother Nature. I think most of us in our cities are fairly disconnected to the forces and the power of nature. And then it is finding a needle in a haystack, and we rely uh, exclusively on indigenous knowledge. And so to work with elders and the real salt of the earth people, the same way there's legendary animals, there are legendary indigenous Aboriginal guides who walk the walk and are the real thing, and live it and breathe it, and to work with them to see how they track, how they know, how they read ice conditions. And I think when you put all of that together, geography, wildlife, expanse, senses, connection to Mother Nature, and indigenous traditional knowledge, it's a combination that's you really have to experience, I think, to understand.
Yep, no, sounds amazing. So what for you have been some of your most memorable moments traveling to the region?
There's so many, and there's so many different seasons that it's a little bit like the question, what's your favorite location? And
Yeah,
the more you know, the more there's different things for different reasons. But I do think there's a spirituality of animal connections, where an animal is not scared, is not changing its behavior, is either accepting or indifferent and continuing to do what it's doing. And so if that's, say, an iceberg with a mother polar bear and cubs that are slowly climbing up a shimmering iceberg that's locked into the sea ice, there's a real magic of sort of pinch me, why am I here, how is this
yeah,
possible? But I also think that looking into the eyes of an animal where there's a certain connection. And we run trips in the fall with very small groups that are on the tundra, and it is possible to have eye contact with the polar bear, even with little animals. We've seen some of my favorites actually are what I call the little guys, but we saw a white Arctic fox head to head with a white snowy owl, and less than half a meter or less than 2 feet apart, and both standing their ground and facing off. Or a ground squirrel that's all of half a foot facing off with a huge polar bear, and they're making eye contact with each other. So I think from the animal connection perspective, that's special to have known certain elders who are no longer with us. There are people who are sort of legendary in their knowledge, and not here anymore, and to think back on how they helped and were part of what we did. And then I'd also go to, which pretty sincere about the smaller kids, and the idea that I actually take more pride in that than in the sort of hardcore adventure, because in many ways I think making something accessible and understandable and reachable for someone who's growing up is in many ways actually harder and perhaps more meaningful than sort of what's the hardest, longest slog you can get through in the most difficult conditions. So and then I'm pretty proud of all of our the films that have been seen by tens of millions of people around the world, not only focused exclusively on the Arctic, but also more broad documentaries and shows where we've facilitated all of the Arctic elements of the shoots.
Okay, awesome. Quite a spread there. So
Mhm.
your company, was it always when you conceived the idea of working with the Arctic, was it always called Arctic Kingdom, or was this something that happened a little bit later?
No, it started right from the beginning. It was one of the very first documentaries ever, and I think arguably probably the top one from 25 odd years ago with National Geographic, was called Arctic Kingdom. And some of the filmmakers that worked on that were also BBC, and people that moonlight or move between productions. And so it was inspirational, plus the idea that there is an animal kingdom that that we all know, but an Arctic kingdom of animals, and that the region is much bigger than any one country or any one area. So from Baffin Island in Canada or Ellesmere over to Greenland, to Svalbard, Arctic Norway, or from the North Slope of Alaska to Iceland. There's many different areas, and obviously Siberia and all of the Russian North. So and what's interesting in the Arctic is things are much closer than people think. So because you're further up north, traveling east or west, you can cover a lot more distance, and that's why most of the flights that travel from North America to Europe, and even many times North America to Asia that cross the pole, go over through the Arctic. And so learning the connections across the Arctic is part of what we've called the Arctic Kingdom.
Yeah, no, brilliant. So with the travel side of your business, what is it you're hoping to give the clients who you attend? What kind of an experience are you hoping they take away from going on one of your tours?
Almost all of our guests are extremely world traveled. Many of them know the differences of where you can see gorillas and what the viewing is in different countries. And I'd say it's much more the rule than the exception. And I mean, we aim to provide and hope to provide the very best travel experience of their lives. So we have some families with mega yachts and private jets, and that want for nothing, and consider their multiple trips to the Arctic to be the very best of their lives as a family, and why they return. And so I think sharing that excitement, many times it comes with some trepidation, meaning one member of the family thinks this is a good idea. Another member says, what are you serious? And yet when you break that ice, pun intended, all of a sudden you get a partner that may not have been on board saying, actually, this is very cool. Or you get younger kids or teenagers that start to want to come back, or come back in a different season. And so I think we talk about being bitten by the Arctic bug, and I think just opening people's eyes and showing them what's possible and how big the area can be, and how much it has to offer, and letting people get bit by the Arctic bug. There is a sense of adventure when people return. No one has any context to judge or comment on where they go or what they did. And I think just sharing that and making it comfortable, making it enjoyable. We have executive chefs, we have gourmet food, we have comfortable accommodations, safari base camps that are set up with heated tents and raised beds and lots of headroom and comfort. So providing access, guidance, comfort, safety, and interpretation to understand what you're seeing, even how to understand the sea ice and effects of climate change over the decades is, I think, something that people are, a lot of times what we find is they come for one thing, and most of the time it is wildlife, but many times they actually leave with a love and appreciation for indigenous knowledge, and that they didn't expect, and is what actually can last as well.
Okay, no, very good. So from the services you provide, how is it differentiated to what other tour companies or companies working in the region provide? What are you looking to be your point of differentiation?
I mean, we're looking to provide the whole solution and the whole experience from the time you start to travel north and the entire journey north. So we typically have people, resources, knowledge at every stopping off point along the way. So if you land around the Arctic Circle, we'll have facilities or people. But then we obviously have the camps in, say, the high Arctic or other areas. So if there are weather delays, and if there are even special opportunities to, rather than just going to one spot, to actually enjoy the journey more, we can piece together very special itineraries where part of the journey is the experience. Comfort and safety is a cornerstone. It is a rough, remote area without much infrastructure, and so being able to add or to build comfortable base camps, with full bathrooms and amenities, is something unique. And then we also specialize really in the not only the entire Arctic, from the subarctic to the extreme high Arctic, but we also are very knowledgeable across the whole hemisphere. So we can provide advice if people want to travel at a certain time of year. We can typically recommend what's really world class at that time of year. If they're looking for the warmest time of the year, or they're looking for something super special, or if they just want general advice. Are you going to the Northwest Territories, or are you going to Greenland or Alaska? There's a lot of choices. Or can you do all of them? And so I think our two areas of specialization is we run trips with polar bears as a focus for far longer across the hemisphere than any other company in the world. We run trips that include polar bears from March all the way through November of every year. And so that's basically the entire polar bear year in many regards, from when they first come out of the dens with young cubs to patrolling the solid sea ice, like what's called the floe edge, where the sea ice ends and the open ocean begins, and you get bears mixing with whales. And then pack ice is after the solid ice breaks, and it's pieces of moving, floating ice, and it's a different environment where walrus pull out on the ice and the bears are moving around, and whales like bowheads will easily find their way through the pack ice. Summer trips at their warmest, where you get glaciers coming down, free floating icebergs, bears along the shore. And then finally in the fall, we have cabins where bears are migrating along the shoreline, and waiting for the ice to freeze so they can go back out on the sea ice. And so we're the only group in the world that has that type of knowledge, experience, over the entire cycle, and that does small groups, and specializes in the what we like to call the best of both worlds, which is the best of hospitality, technology, safety, combined with the best of indigenous knowledge, and guides to reach the special corners that are way off the charts, but worth the effort and to get there.
No, awesome. So, well, now let's give people a bit of a lowdown on traveling to, say, the Canadian Arctic. So, firstly, how do you get there? So, what's the most common routes to get you to where one of your expeditions or tours kind of to get started?
So there are, I guess there's a couple of different gateways. For Baffin Island, which is on the eastern Arctic, the main gateway is Ottawa, and occasionally Montreal. And so Ottawa is easily accessible as Canada's capital, and it is roughly a 3-hour flight by jet up to Iqaluit, which is at the bottom of Baffin Island. And if traveling to the high Arctic, it's almost another 3 hours to actually go up the length of Baffin Island. As we move further into central Canada, Winnipeg is the hub to go up to Churchill and to for fall polar bears along Hudson Bay, and Edmonton and Calgary are the gateways north for Yellowknife and all of the lodges, and for Northern Lights on the effectively center of the Arctic. So there are different gateways, the same way that eventually Seattle is largely the jumping off point for flights into Alaska from the US. So as you go across North America, there's different routes going north, but it's roughly 3 hours by jet into around the Arctic Circle, and another 3 hours or so will get you into the high Arctic, and beyond that is questions of bush planes, things like twin otters, ski planes that can go even higher if there's a reason or a desire to.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned that you guys cater to a very long season for polar bears, especially. When do you think is the best time of year to go visit the Canadian Arctic region?
I think every season is the best of something.
Yeah.
And so if you wanted to have a snowy environment but warm or warming, and you wanted to have the greatest mix of wildlife, then I think probably May into June, which is the floe edge season, where you have camps on and around the sea ice. The temperatures are typically a little above freezing.
Yeah.
So not warm, but not super cold either. And eventually it can get up to 10 to 15 degrees or so Celsius. So I think as a wintry looking general whales, polar bears, general adventure, midnight sun, that May and June are probably the best time. For many families, if warmth is the biggest factor, then the warmest time of year is typically mid-July through August, and that can be in the 15 to 20 degrees, and there's still polar bears, walrus. In summer, you get the whales moving into various bays and estuaries that they can be seen. So kayaking is possible. And in the earlier spring, you still have midnight sun with the sun circling in the sky. But later in the summer, you can get glimpses of northern lights as well. So a little bit warmer, sometimes traveling by boat rather than snowmobile or sledges and things is it can be easier for older people or that may have some mobility restrictions. I think purely as from a polar bear focus, probably the fall when you're on the ground in small groups along the tundra and literally at sort of eye level with fairly relaxed bears in the region is super special. And if you are more hardcore, if you've had more Arctic experience, then early spring when you have crisp, clear, cold days with vibrant northern lights and icebergs and little baby bears is hard to beat. But early spring in sort of March, April is very cold. So, you know, minus 30 or so is probably too much for a first time visitor, but
Yeah.
we have had them, and we keep people warm regardless, and they're all special. It's just what is your where are you on the adventure personality spectrum?
Okay, so the colder you get, the more adventurous you're going to be. So basically,
Well, and only the spring is the true early spring in the Arctic is the coldest time of year, but it's and we find many people. This gets back to being bitten by the Arctic bug, but you may come in June or in August or in the fall to start, but then you want to see another time of year and something different. And we talked about how different the Arctic is from the subarctic to the high Arctic, but it's also very different. It's an entirely different world based on each season. And so if you go somewhere in March or April and then you go back in August, it's almost unrecognizable in terms of how you travel, even what types of wildlife you see, how people dress, and that's also some of not just, and maybe this is a very important thing, not just ticking something off, but truly experiencing it. And so even going back to an area to see it at a different time of year gives you a much deeper understanding of of the Arctic, and again how it's changing with time and with evolving climate.
yep, no, definitely. So, what is if you're going only for one, say, one trip, because you're, basically running out of time and you would like to travel around all the world, and then you only have this one opportunity. Um, what would be some of the key things you should look to try and cover in this one trip? Like the key
Um,
destinations and experiences.
I think it goes back to the same things we talked about a bit earlier, where it I think is to have sort of quiet connections or spiritual time with the beauty of Mother Nature. So I like in a lot of the the geography to being in a cathedral, it just to actually have quiet time and to take it all in, and the luxury of being in a very small group that has, can access such stunningly gorgeous huge areas. So I think having some time focused on taking a deep breath and just being. I think if you rush around too much, you start to lose some of that connection. um I think for many people, seeing a polar bear is starting point on someone's bucket list.
Yeah.
But again, many travelers might have been on a cruise ship, or might have, maybe they've seen a bear in Churchill, or somewhere else. And so I think seeing an ecosystem that's alive with different animals interacting is very special. And I don't think it makes a big difference which combinations they are, but to see interactions of wildly different animals coexisting and thriving in a new environment. And then I also think making local connections and learning about traditional knowledge and history, and gaining the respect for what it means. And this is not about shows or performances or things like that. It's actually more about a morning coffee or having lunch out on the tundra, out on the sea ice, and watching as people confer and decide whether to go left or right, or why, or spotting, using spotting scopes, a little dot on the horizon that ends up being a polar bear, ends up being a pod of belugas with their breath coming up. So the skill to navigate not only the environment, but to find the proverbial needle in a haystack. And so I think if you come back with all of those elements, it doesn't really matter what season it is. That those are the ingredients that I think make it special.
Okay. So what kind of experiences can you have? Because you've mentioned obviously going off on sleds and snowmobiles. You have kayaking opportunities when the weather is a little bit warmer. So I'm talking about experiences beyond just the wildlife experiences here. So what other kind of activities may be included in one of your tours?
All of the winter trips and trips around snow and sea ice, so that's March through June, travel typically using snowmobiles and sledges. So passengers can ride in a sledge with suspension seats and enjoy the view. People who love motorcycling or motorsports can drive their own. Um, there is the chance. So we started with scuba diving as our focus, and it continues to be something that we offer on select trips to dive under the ice, to dive around icebergs can be super special. Cross country skiing, hiking, heli hiking, flight seeing by twin otter, like a bush plane, or by helicopter can be special. Visiting multiple communities, learning about Inuit art, things like tapestries, print studios, soapstone carvings, jewelry makers, can be special ingredients. Artists like throat singers, I think are all the types of things you can do. Fishing, there's some amazing Arctic char are typically running in the spring and summer months. And so fishing for 20-pound, 10-kilo Arctic char can be special. And then we talk about country food, but that's food that comes off the land, and if it's prepared with chefs, and sometimes we do what's called country food fusion. So bringing tastes from other ethnicities and other types of food, and then mixing it and using Arctic country food ingredients to give really very special, memorable meals that are unlike anything else. And so that I think all of those are. In summer, you can also do ATVing on sort of four-wheel drives in certain areas where there's paths. We have supported mountain biking on and offered it on sea ice or in summer. Actually, we on a super extreme basis, we supported a Red Bull film called North of Nightfall that you can download readily. And that was some of the world's longest downhill mountain biking from as much as 8,000 feet drop in the extreme high Arctic. So that's right off the charts. But from skiing to biking to snowmobiling to just going on hikes and boating or kayaking, there's lots of different ways to experience things, and most of the time we offer all of it. So if some people are less mobile and less inclined, they can stay in the motorboats, and the people that want to kayak and or row or do something, paddleboard, you can sort of choose your dial in your adventure level.
Okay, brilliant. So what about wildlife? You've mentioned polar bears. Obviously, everyone wants to go and see a polar bear. You've got the beluga whales, you've got the narwhals. What kind of other wildlife can you expect to see when you're up on one of your tours?
Um, there's marine life, so seals, whales, polar bears, walrus. There's terrestrial life on the land, so that can be caribou migrations, it can be muskox, it can be Arctic wolves, the white wolves. And then there's bird life. There can be peregrine falcons, snow goose, tundra swans, king eider ducks, huge walls of murres or guillemots, millions of birds. There's many special bird spots, ivory gulls. There's many types of unique bird life. And when and if possible, we hope to be able to see a little bit of all of that. So you get some marine life, some terrestrial life, and the birds tend to be everywhere. So I'd say that those are the typical cornerstones.
So what's your favorite animal in the region?
I think it's probably a toss-up between the narwhals when they're relaxed, and specifically the male narwhals with the biggest tusks. Many times they're motoring by, but sometimes, after a storm or when the mood is right, they will just lounge and they will fence with their tusks, and it is pretty special. You can actually hear them jousting.
Yeah.
And then I also think beluga whales, because a lot of times the belugas are the most social, and they will sing. And we've had experiences where they're basically dancing with you in the water. So if someone is snorkeling, which is another activity in a dry suit, an inquisitive whale can basically come up below you and can again make eye contact, and if it chooses, if it engages, will basically mirror you or sing at you. You can hear the beluga, which is why they're called the canary of the sea. Sometimes you can hear them even through the ice when you're standing above. And I think the playfulness of the beluga is hard to beat.
Oh, great. So now you've talked a little bit about the local indigenous population, the Inuits. So what can people perhaps learn from them? Like on one of your trips, you've mentioned there's an opportunities to kind of interact with them. So, many people may not know a lot about them. So maybe you can kind of give a little bit of a teaser about, what you could expect by your encounter with, getting to know them.
Well, Inuit have lived in the Arctic for thousands of years. Knowledge runs deep through generations. There's very detailed maps of the Arctic where almost every bay and every mountain and every inlet have unique names. So what looks like a big blank region on our maps actually are extremely detailed. Many people come from certain, not just a village, but from somewhere on the land. And so when you're visiting a bay, there, it might be where someone's grandfather was born, or where their mother was, or where their families used to live. There's a very deep connection with wildlife, because that was what and still sustains people, and really where people's spirits are fed,
Yeah.
maintained and flourished, and understanding that hunter-gatherer culture, not just animals, but berries. And in summer, berry picking is off the charts in enthusiasm, and even something as basic as iceberg water, just very, very pure water. There's many parts of country food, and how Inuit connect very deeply with the land. And then you have just friendships between people, and it very much in the modern world goes to Facebook and sharing
Yeah.
photos. And you can be a little bit of a, if you make friends like anywhere in the world, a little bit of a voyeur, and follow along what else is going in other seasons, and stay in touch. And what we've, going back to the kids as well, is families are very large and very strong, not just immediate sort of nuclear families, but extended families in many ways. And when there are kids who come on private trips, we also try to encourage guides to bring their own families, and it gives kids the chance to connect with other people who are more or less their own age,
Yeah.
and share and experience the knowledge of the North, from the best ambassadors, and the people that call it home.
Yep. No, sounds like an awesome experience getting to know these people. So you offer two types of tours, I believe, like getaways and safaris. What's the actual difference between them?
Safaris are typically week-long programs, somewhere between a week to 10 days, and typically go up into the high Arctic, and are based out of base camps. So luxury, comfortable camps. The getaways are typically shorter trips, normally 3 or 4 days, and are typically hotel based. And so you can come up on a Friday and stay till Sunday, or stay till Monday. And we offer them all year round, so different seasons. Winter getaways can see northern lights. Summer getaways can do kayaking or boating. There can be a wildlife element within getaways, but typically it's more activity based, culture based, art based, and sometimes that also can be suitable for people who have less time, or if you want to have large events, business groups, big family groups, something a little bit different. So 3 to 4 day trips are what we call getaways, largely hotel or lodge based, whereas the safari camps are typically we call a long haul destination. So people come from all over the world, and their main reason to come to Canada or to the Arctic is to spend some extended time and
Yeah.
understand the weather and have a good shot at seeing something very special.
And what does a typical itinerary look like for a safari?
Normally, it's 1 day of flying north from Ottawa to Iqaluit, and then on to the community, the village farther north. Uh, you then overnight in your first night within the community, and typically then leave the next morning either by snowmobile or sled or boat in the summer. And then the next day is traveling out to the base camp. Then over the next typically 5 or 6 days, it's daily sorties out from the base camp. And we try to go to different areas. So it may be going north one day, going south another day, going into fjords on one day, going out to farther to sea another day. And typically we it's up to our expedition team and our guides to recommend where to go, but we try to make a best guess, and if we find something very special, it could be, you know, glaciers calving, it could be wildlife, it could be bears or walrus or whales, then it's just about turning off engines and, you know, being in an area. If there's nothing more special than just being quiet, you know, if you can have lunch in an area that something interesting is going on, and just watch it and not make noise, you know, that then you become part of it. And so you're hoping to bump into these, you know, special things, but in the meantime you're seeing more geography and covering, you know, a certain area. That the base camp we try to put central, and we will move where they are each year based on conditions.
Yeah.
But and then you on at the end of the trip, it's 1 day back to the community. Typically your last night is in a community hotel, and then you fly out all the way south, back down to Ottawa. Some people can, depending on where you're going, connect on straight to home, and other people overnight in Ottawa and leave the next day.
Okay. And then how many people normally on a safari trip?
They range from, typically our smallest groups are around 8, and largest are around 16.
Okay. So to finish up about the region, what would you say is the number one reason or reasons why someone should include the Arctic or Canadian Arctic as a place they travel at least once in their life?
I think it's the very best combination of wildlife, culture, and geography. So I think that combination is special. And if you haven't been to the Arctic, then I think it's unlike anything you've experienced, including if you have been to the Antarctic. The Arctic is still very different. And if you have been to the Arctic before, but maybe somewhat limited on a cruise ship passing through, or I think the idea of actually connecting with the land and having a deeper experience is very special in and of itself.
So for your, so changing direction a little bit, do you have your own bucket list?
Always. We also do exploratory trips, so for, you know, that, and we support science all over beyond tourism locations. So we're always adding to places, and many times it's not by any stretch about checking somewhere off quickly. There's places I've been to probably 6 to 8 times, and the goal is not to get there or be there or get the photo. The goal is actually to spend 2 weeks there or something at a certain time of year. And then if it blows your mind, which is what we're hoping for, then it's to go back and try it a second time to confirm that it actually wasn't a fluke the
Yeah.
first year. And so that sort of changes what you're trying. But I think there's elements of the best. The best of is something we try and do, and something like the best of the floe edge, which can be from the top of Baffin and Lancaster Sound to the best of Jones Sound, which is between Devon Island and Ellesmere, and even over to the Greenland side on the Kane Basin, the largest calving glacier in the world. In the northern hemisphere. It's twice or 3 times the size of Ilulissat's glaciers. It's an area with growing polar bear populations because of the amount of ice coming off, so pushing into more unexplored areas such as the Kane Basin, and understanding how areas link, meaning that many regions are very connected to each other. And so rather than just saying I've been somewhere, I think actually understanding how areas link and doing that is what I would say is part of my bucket list, even somewhere I've actually been many times.
Okay, awesome. So what's your perspective on the current state of conservation in the, well, let's say focus on one area, the Canadian Arctic? So, what's going well and what could be done better?
I mean, the biggest change obviously is climate, and on the whole, animals I think have, from what we know, have evolved over time. Some areas where ice is thinner or breaking, there are scientifically confirmed higher numbers of bears growing. Perhaps they've got more access to moving ice
Yeah.
with more seals and things on it. But I think beyond any one initiative, it is just the risk of losing ice and what the ramifications are. And I'd say beyond just the Canadian Arctic, that's the exact same risk in Greenland. I think even risk to culture. Greenland has a huge number of dog teams that have been very deeply rooted in culture and hunting. And the numbers of dog teams have dropped significantly because ice conditions are getting thinner and less reliable. And so, I think it is a big picture concern that the world shares, but the impact I think is exponential in the Arctic.
Yeah, no, definitely. We need to do something about addressing this because we'll lose, as you said, this amazing opportunity to see wildlife in its kind of rawest form and also the environment. So, what about local communities? So, what can be done more to kind of like maintain the culture, to support these kind of communities? Because we don't, obviously they're pretty special and unique. There's always a risk of kind of like losing that kind of history.
There is, and there one of the things that's special with Nunavut and a lot of areas in the north is because it's more isolated. In many ways, culture is more protected by distance. There's fewer visitors, but it's not immune. There is much TV, English, internet. There are many initiatives to try to encourage the preservation and development of culture. And so whether that's capturing knowledge from elders before they pass away, and or whether it's the teaching of youth for skills on the land. Um, in the olden days, families would live largely on the land and have dog teams and self teach.
Yeah.
That chain was broken with people being forced into communities and staying there. And now with the cost of snowmobiles and fuel, it's actually very expensive for people to get out and stay out on the land for harvesting. And so something like tourism can actually facilitate youth coming out together with elders. Tourism is one of the only industries where people that are, say, young and really good at English and speaking, and but maybe as they're younger don't have quite the same knowledge of the land. And on the other spectrum, you've got unilingual elders who speak almost no English but are salt of the earth characters that know a lot and very friendly, jovial, wonderful people, and they have a lot to teach the youth. And so there are programs separate from tourism that try to make this connection, because that is what the preservation of culture is about, in addition to art and other cultural things. But I think tourism can actually play a role, and it also plays a role in a sense of pride and a sense of sharing one's land and interpretation, and even appreciating that where you live is super special, that people from all over the world want to see or understand, and to be part of the global economy or global, have global friends. And so I think that tourism helps make those connections between youth and elders. It obviously creates employment, which gives people more financial means to build cabins or to buy snowmobiles or to spend time. And there are cultural opportunities for things like throat singing, like performances. There's an amazing Inuit art circus called Art Cirque out of Igloolik that is really almost, I'd say, Cirque du Soleil sort of level of performance, but out of a small community. And so I think the more that there is opportunity to have commercial funds behind some of these initiatives, it helps to keep them alive. It helps to fund them, and they can exist without tourism, but tourism can help them go a little bit farther and persevere and do more.
Yep. No, definitely. So we'll closing out a little bit and changing a little bit more direction. So what's your definition of adventure?
Adventure is in the eye of the beholder. It's a little bit like beauty, and I've had to tell a story of a group of teachers that came up a few 10 years ago and spent 2 or 3 nights in a hotel, and for me is more or less forgettable. And I met one 5 or 6 years later, and she talked about how life-changing the experience was and how memorable it was. And so I think you really, as much as you can ramp it up, adventure is up to each person. And I think there's an unlimited supply of adventure in the Arctic. So if you're into extreme hardcore, you want to build an igloo in the middle of Arctic winter and sleep in it and dog sled and look for bears, or learn how to survive. And you can go on the far side, but at the same time, if you want to kayak in summer, stay in a hotel and look for whales and seals and meet interesting people. I think there's a scale, and it's up to each person to decide where they land, and it's up to us to support that continuum. And what resonated with me is just, you can change someone's life even in 2 or 3, in one good day that's based out of a hotel with an amazing day trip. So and then you can support the most extreme Red Bull downhill racing ever on the planet, and that's sort of your spectrum.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, it's basically just getting out of your comfort zone, isn't it? And reconnecting with nature, which you know, alluded to in the beginning is very important, especially us city folks who, you know, never get to spend a lot of time. We kind of like forget about how special it is. So, so I guess that's a good lead into, you know, why do you think people need to include more adventure travel in their life? You know, like you have the cultural experiences where people just go, visit a city and then go, oh, that was wonderful and that was a great travel experience. But, you know, why do you think people need to do more kind of like adventure type travel?
You know, I think travel, any kind of travel, broadens your horizons, even if it's not adventure travel, but just traveling to other countries and other cultures does change you. And I think it makes people more empathetic, more understanding. I think it breaks down preconceived notions. And I do think it makes the world a better place. I think adventure travel, I think, can get you out of your head a little bit. And I think a lot of the people are very successful people, even as a mindset, people that are very driven. And I think sometimes it's the only way you can turn off something that's always moving in your mind.
Yeah,
If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner, if you're a CFO, if you know, if you're an emergency nurse, if you know, if there's a lot going on in people's minds that is somewhat all consuming, and it's hard to have a real break. Even if you go to a beach, for the right people, you sit on a beach and your mind's still going. You can't quite let go of your real life. And I think the challenge and the opportunity of really amazing experiences is the experiences on such a high level that it sort of forces you to actually take a break from whatever it is that you're always thinking about. And I think that actually is you know, a great break and a privilege in itself, and I'd argue is good for mental health, and probably even for the whatever it is that you're always obsessing over and, you know, being the best at, that it probably makes you better to take that break. But seeking out places that really just force you to forget about your day to day, and you know, take a deep breath and enjoy it, and maybe force you to actually accept Mother Nature in a way that most of us control our own destinies and daily plans in a way that Mother Nature doesn't interfere much. So it almost brings you back to basics, and I think that's good for people and highly addictive. So
no, very true. So, do you have a life motto?
I say you either laugh or cry, and if you cry, you're not going to make it. So you might as well keep laughing.
Very good. And what's your definition of living your best life, or what I call a legend life?
I think no regrets. Go for it. Do the best you can. Persevere. Commit. I mean, nothing comes easy. There'll be, you know, but if it's worth it, and if the fire maintains, then I think eventually you'll get there, and maybe enjoy the journey rather than the destination.
Very good. No, brilliant. Well, Graham, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. I found the talk very informative, certainly inspired. I'm certainly very interested in checking out the Arctic now, or Canadian Arctic, because as you said, it's quite a large area. So for anyone interested in learning a little bit more about yourself and then also Arctic Kingdom, how can they find you online?
Our website is arctickingdom.com. So ARCTIC KINGDOM.com, or we're fairly well linked in. So if you start to research any type of wildlife or special Arctic safari, we're not far from the top of the searches. But our Arctic Kingdom's website is your best starting point, and we have many special guides, and we have many custom proposals for private trips as well that we can offer.
Awesome. Well, once again, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, Graham.
Thanks so much, Damien, and have a great day.